can't quite believe it's been 3 months since we last had a chat about the market, Nathan, but there it is. Time moves quickly.
Time is flying.
Yeah. I wanted to, if it's okay with you, address some of the comments that were made from our Move IQ audience about things that we discussed. Not everyone's always going to agree on anything, and predictions are just sort of predictions and opinions. So, but and everyone's opinions are different. It's subjective, and that's how it should be. But I wanted to give you the opportunity today to respond to some of our comments. Somebody wrote in that they felt we didn't cover enough of the recession, interest rates no longer falling, GDP being static, and reductions being seen in some locations on the portals. And their kind of quote was, "It's affordability that sells property, not optimism."
And do you know, I think that's absolutely fantastic. Last time we spoke, we were talking at quite a high level, and you do get in any marketplace natural fluctuations. And I think, things like inflation and interest rates are tied in quite tightly. They do have an effect on the number of properties that sell and the timescale that it takes for that to happen. And I think equally, if you remember, we shot out of COVID and we saw the prices zoom up, and they have just settled down a little bit. We've seen that happening in real term. Yeah. But also, different areas of the market have moved differently. So we're currently sat at the moment, we've started to see a rebound in the number of higher priced properties that are coming back into the marketplace and transacting. And if you remember last time we spoke, that was a little bit different. So we do see those variations. Affordability is always going to be the final driver. Can I actually afford that thing that I desire? And I think, if we start to see interest rates coming down, we're seeing inflation sort of levelling out, we start to see interest rates coming down, that will give people that confidence, all being well, to be able to take that next step. It's a big step and it's expensive buying houses.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because if those things start to fall, people should feel more confident.
They should do.
Whether that will transpire into actually moving or not.
And I think that's absolutely, because again, we do get the seasonal variations. We're sitting in spring at the moment, so we're seeing more properties come to the market, which is what we would expect, and that's exactly what has started to happen. And we've seen more people registering to start looking for houses, and all of the portals are recording that as much as the agents. So we've got more people looking. We've got more properties coming on the market, so that's giving a bit more choice. Yeah. Prices aren't shooting up and rising. They're in certain areas, the higher priced properties are creeping up again now, but the rest of the market's holding itself fairly well. And so actually, I think, are we in a position where we're going to see any major changes in that marketplace? Probably not. But if we can get interest rates down and we can hold things from a pricing point of view, it's not great, but it will make things a little bit more affordable for people.
You and I are both agents. We're not economists, and we're not rulers of governors of the country. But where do you see the economy?
I think the economy overall, obviously taking housing aside, we're in a very interesting period. We're coming up to elections potentially very, very shortly, and that always has that shuttering effect on the housing market, and also it can be from the economy. I think the underlying economy will actually be fine, and I think we are going through the pain of inflation, and the real costs of that are now starting to hit people, which is noticeable.
Yes,
we are getting reports of that coming through, and that's transferring into the housing market where the numbers of viewings that are needed per sale has started to increase again now, and people are making offers on property, not necessarily paying over the asking price that they were. So that's the real impact that's starting to happen. So it does mean we've got to get prices realistic. Yeah. We've got to market correctly to show the properties, and the buyers have got to want to have the confidence to go ahead and buy.
It's delicate, isn't it? It is delicate. I think that this year people really are noticing the cost of living.
It is indeed. And I think, we forget very often that, the good news is, minimum wage, for example, we saw a big increase in that, 8-10% in that, but that then has a knock-on effect to businesses, because obviously if they're not making enough profit, then they struggle to make those payments, and so we are in a position where people are watching the pennies as much as they are doing the pounds. I think we understand that, and moving home, whether it's for renting a property or buying a property is not a cheap, it is an expensive project.
We had another one. Somebody wrote in, who is lobbying to change the way in which properties change hands in the UK? Somebody else flagged the chronic issues related to the process, which are at odds with all other developed markets, creating huge costs and inefficiency, as well as worry and uncertainty. So the question was, who's lobbying, Nathan?
Absolutely. Well, we are, obviously, and quite strongly. And let me probably expand a little bit on that, because people say, oh, what's going on and who's doing what? There are a number of different incentives and movements out there to look at the housing market and pull it apart. Clive Betts, the MP who chairs the Housing Committee, has now launched a process, an inquiry into the home buying and selling process.
Good.
Which again, we've been part of that along with all of the other professional bodies as well. Equally, there are groups such as the Home Buying and Selling Group, again, which we all sit on, which is a cross-discipline and a cross-sector group which has been focusing on this for several years now. And it isn't as simple as people think it is. I mean, the irony, I sit here and you'll remember this, I remember coming into this industry and you could find a buyer for a property and you could exchange contracts in 4 to 6 weeks. Let's step forward, 20, 25 years, and all of a sudden we've got technology that makes us faster. We're not selling any more houses than we were selling back then, so the same number of transactions. Yeah. But it's taking 3 times as long to do something you could do.
It's madness.
3 times as quick 25 years ago. So there is a madness in it, and there is a need for that process to reform. I think we all understand that, but how that is driven, there isn't one answer. There are lots of parties involved in that.
Do you feel those parties are working together now?
I think there's a lot more collaboration than there used to be. I think initially you had that standoff, we do this and we do this and we do this. But I think what people have now realised is they've got to come together. You've also had direct intervention through Competition and Markets Authority and trading standards with material upfront information. And that is now requiring agents under the consumer protection regulations to be more upfront with the information about the properties that people view in the first place.
Meaning they should make better decisions.
Correct. They should be able to make better informed decisions. And the output of that is they know what they're buying in the first place and all of the information to do that, rather than starting to buy something and then pulling out or renegotiating later on, because we do have a 25 to 30% cancellation rate, which in its own right is a very expensive project.
So in answer to your question, Property Mark are lobbying, but you're not the only ones, but there's a lot of people.
We're not, and there's a lot of coordination. I think there's a lot of...
That's good.
A lot of collaboration and focus and agreed direction, really. And
we are all pushing in the same direction. Everybody wants
100%.
And everyone's frustrated about the system that we've got at the moment.
Absolutely.
So we're going to sort it out, are we?
It's going to happen.
Good man, I heard it here first.
Last year, you told us that if you knew a sale or letting agent was a qualified member of a professional body maintaining high industry standards, you would choose them over an agent who was not. Well, agents who are members of Property Mark are not only regulated, but qualified too. There are currently over 18,000 members right across the UK, all adhering to a strict code of conduct and membership rules. And that is why we at Move IQ endorse what they do. To find your local agent, look for Property Mark and let them know I sent you.
Somebody else wrote in, they're a first-time buyer, and they're looking at potential price reductions with glee. They're looking forward to house price reductions. And I understand that. We talked about an affordability reset last time we were together. But it feels to me like there's perhaps a bigger gap for those who have home ownership in reach and those who don't.
I would agree with that. Really, I don't think we can doubt that. The increases in salaries and people's living expenses against even the multiples that you needed of your salary to buy a house, are continuing to grow. And let's not forget the undeniable trend that sits behind that. We have an increasing population.
Sure.
And we're going that map for the next 5 to 10 years is not going to change. We have an already lagging shortage of available properties because of missed building targets for several years. So all of the micro changes in the market, which we're looking at seasonally, we still have the underlying trend of more people for less houses.
Yeah.
And that will be, regardless how any of us want that to be, the driver that continues to make property more expensive.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it is supply and demand. Any market, whether
Absolutely
you're trading
right.
in Wellington boots or
And I think the
potatoes.
challenge here is you can't sort that supply problem out quickly. So if we look at the car industry, they couldn't build over COVID, blah, blah, blah. And we had a lot of delays getting new cars through. Now, within a year, 18 months, they've managed to get production up to the levels to cater with the lag. The problem with the housing market is it will take, even if we go to the government targets beyond them, 30, 40, 50 years to backfill what we've not actually built. So there isn't a quick solution to this. What you do need is a long-term commitment across all of the parties
wouldn't that be nice?
to a national framework of delivery.
Yeah. We've got where we are today through short-term policy, housing policies.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, we've got to work our way through that one. Here we go. Yeah, somebody else said, ultimately, we need long-term solutions to stop house prices continuing to run away from wage growth. I presume you agree with that one?
Absolutely. I don't think any of us can. We need affordable living, and you shouldn't be in a position in today's world where, we're getting to the stage where, people are struggling to get a roof over their own head. And also we're in a position where, how do you deal with that lack of supply without a concerted effort?
Another one that came up, agents overvaluing property. And I've certainly read about it in industry news recently that some agents are setting asking prices to win instructions. It's always happened. Can we just sort of back that one around a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's a good one to do. And it is one we could look at in several different ways if we want to pull it apart. Are there agents that go out there and deliberately become overly optimistic? So we're not talking a small percentage, we're talking massively optimistic just to win, to get the business on the market. I'm sad to say that I think, there are certainly incidences of that. But if you look at the mainstream, I think what you often find is very often the desire to maximise the price doesn't always come from the agent necessarily. As agents, we want a property to go on the market at realistic prices. We want it to be sensible. We want it to sell in a reasonable space of time and get the best price possible. Very often that can be owner-led, and my house is better than the one down the road and therefore I want more money for it. We want you to try the market a little bit higher. And it's a brave agent that walks away from every instruction because it doesn't go on the market at the price they specifically want. And what you often find, a house goes to the market, it either sells, in which case, but if it doesn't sell, then obviously you get the price reduction, or maybe the move to a second agent at a more realistic price, and then it sells. So the market always finds its level, but it's the length of time it takes to get there.
I've seen quite a bit of it around the country over the last month, where a property's come down in price, is now with the second agent. Even good properties.
And again, I mean, the long-term trend, you often find there's a joke within the sector, that it's often the second agent that sells. The first agent will go out there and appease the vendor and go out there and have a go. But actually, once the owner's gone through that of trying the market, then very often they'll think, well, okay, we want to get on now. Second agent comes out, reaffirms it, and it goes to the market at a more realistic level.
Have you got any advice for homeowners and how they should gauge what's the right price to start with? Because obviously, they're ambitious. It's their most valuable asset. They want as much money as
absolutely.
possible.
And I think the interesting thing is, I used to remember this when I was sat practicing all the time. If somebody's buying, they wanted everything to be realistically cheap, and if they were selling, then then obviously their property had to sell for the maximum price. You sell for as high as you can, you buy for as low as you can. The reality is, if you are looking to sell a property, the truth of the matter is, it's a misnomer that going on the market at a ridiculously high price will get you that. Actually, what you normally find is if a house goes on the market at the right price with the right agent, then it will normally go on the market and sell in a very good period of time and get a good price. You often find the houses that go on the market too much money end up reducing. People look at it, what's wrong with it?
Yes.
Why hasn't it sold? Why has it come down? They often end up selling it for less money than they could have done if they'd gone on the market at the right price in the first place. And
but what is the right price? And it's very difficult when some perhaps agents are being over ambitious with the prices that they're suggesting.
Yeah, well, I think a good quality agent, and certainly Property Mark members, I would add, will advocate using all of the local knowledge at their disposal, plus all of the marketing reports and fine tuning, because every house is different. Just because two similar houses on the street, people have done different things with them, and that's not always reflected in the automatic models. And I think that's sometimes where it goes a little bit astray. So you should engage with your professionals, you should talk to them, and you should take their advice, because they will want to look after you.
It's not a science.
It's not a science.
No.
And I think equally, because of the amount of information that go out there now, you'll often find the householder has spent more time looking at their own property and their value, has a very fixed idea nowadays what their house value is, which 20, 25 years ago they didn't, because that information wasn't in the public environment. And so that's where sometimes I think people have an idea of what their property value, but they're not aware of what's happening in the market. They're not aware of the sentiment, and
they haven't been in all the houses that the agents.
Correct. And also, I would say the buyers, because it is to one of your first time buyer there. He's waiting and sitting for the prices to dip to the right level, and in he'll go. The market is controlled by the buyers and the amount of money they've got to spend at any one time. And if the buyers are only buying at a certain level, then you've got to take that into account.
Finally, if we may, just to round things off, top tips if you were a first-time buyer now, what would you be mindful of?
Absolutely. I think if I was a first-time buyer today, I would be thinking about certainly what mortgage product do I want to go into. I would be looking at something which gives me consistency rather than worrying about the short and long terms of interest rate reductions. Okay. Moving into a home for the first time, there are unforeseen costs. And so if you know what you're paying out every single month on your mortgage, at least you can budget and work around of that. So certainly that would be one. Secondly, I would try and think about something that enables me to be there just that little bit longer as well. The last thing you want to do is move into a property that means you have to then sell it in a very short space of time because of the costs of buying. So if you can afford that little bit extra, then it's worth doing it, because you're in there for the longer term, really.
Or find something where you can add value or change 100%, or extend.
100%, because you can do that gradually. Yeah. It's not always what property is and where it is. It's how you feel when you're in there. You spend a lot of time looking out of a property. You need to feel right in there. The worst thing, and I've done it myself, if you move into a property that's not right for you, you don't settle. And it is your home. So
but it's the hard bit is always identifying when you're on a viewing, is that the property, or is there going to be another one next week that's going to give you a better feeling?
There will always be something coming down the conveyor belt.
Yeah.
I think you've got to view a property more than once, to fully appreciate it. You see something different the second, third time you go to a property. So I'd certainly advocate viewing more than once. There will always be the next property coming down, and I think when you...
And it's always going to be a big decision.
And it's always going to be a big decision. Yeah. And very often you've only got so much choice because of affordability, certainly if you're a first-time buyer. But at some point, you'll know when it's right to take the jump. Just like jump in a swimming pool, deep breath, in you go.
What about advice for first-time sellers?
Yeah, so this is sometimes an interesting one, because not only are you now trying to sell, but you're also trying to buy. So you've already done the buy bit, but when you're trying to buy and sell it, it's very difficult. And it takes you separating those emotions. Again, speak to a range of agents, listen to what they've got to say, listen to where the market is. And certainly for a first-time seller, it's worth looking at the financial aspects of the sale of the property. If I sell at this price or I sell slightly lower, how does that impact me on the buying front? Speak to a mortgage advisor, get a true understanding of all of the costs that are involved, because, again, you may have additional costs you've not thought about, and you don't need any surprises down the way. Look at the budgets, look at the areas, and again, take your time, check the areas out that you want to go. So when you are ready to go to the market, you've got a clear understanding of where you want to try and go. It makes that job so much easier than finding a buyer and then starting the whole process and your buyer getting frustrated and going somewhere else.
How do you get your property and yourself ready to go to market? Because it's a lot about preparation.
It's all about preparation, and it's understanding in your own mind that this is what you want to do, because once you start that process, there's a lot of cogs going to turn, the agents are going to turn up, your financial advisor. So it's making sure you're in the headspace to do that. And then it is preparing ready. It's speaking to your financial advisor. It's understanding the costs from a solicitor. It's speaking to an agent.
Yeah.
It's looking at the removal costs and how you intend to deal with that. You're going to move yourself or get a removal in. The more information you can aim with up front, will make it a lot easier.
What about paperwork?
Paperwork's very important. So a good agent will probably give you what's called a property information questionnaire to fill in. And that's quite a testing document because it asks you about your own property and sometimes you don't know. So it's working through that, making sure the house is clean and tidy, making sure that you've covered up any decorating that needs to be done and presented well. The usual things, declutter the house. You know, people don't want to come in and see socks and shoes and things like that hanging around. So it does mean probably living a little bit differently than we all like to do every day. But presentation is important because when those buyers come out, they have got choice at the moment.
How important is photographs nowadays? Because I see some great ones, and I also see some pretty poor ones. But marketing of your most, it's the agent's job.
It is indeed, and that's probably the fundament. The agents these days are marketeers more than anything else, and they will advise you on how to dress the property ready to be presented for photographs, and it is up to you to listen. So it does sometimes
take advice,
decluttering, sometimes making sure the furniture's arranged correctly in the room.
Should they ask for that advice? Because
yes, they should.
They should actually physically ask the agent, do you have any advice? How should I present my property? Should I leave the sofa there? Should I tidy that, move that?
Absolutely. They are looking at houses every single day.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't matter what size and shape room you've got, they've been in it, they've seen similar pieces of furniture. And most agents will offer that information anyway.
But equally, the agent who's just won this very important piece of business doesn't want to upset you or seem impolite or ungrateful by saying, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, would you mind moving that?
I think a good professional agent would, and that's probably where I would tend to say no. Once you've obtained the instruction, the reality is you're there to try and sell the property. You're not going to do that with your leg tied behind your back. So the reality is everybody's working together. This is a collaboration between the agent and the seller to get the house sold. And so actually you're not going to disadvantage somebody. You're actually advantaging them by actually giving them the advice and telling them how they need to present the property.
Nathan, you used that lovely word again, collaboration. And it's so important in this world, and there's not enough of it around.
I agree with you, and I think the main thing is it's very easy to get entrenched. And, you know, you'll sometimes hear house sellers, my agent hasn't done this, or my agent hasn't done that, or the agent saying the householder hasn't done this. You are in a partnership. And that, for me, has always been the most successful thing, really. You're working together to try and get the best price you can do for the property. Yeah. And more importantly, find the right buyer that's probably going to continue it the way that you have.
Good talking to you. Can we do it again soon?
Absolutely, Phil.
I'm committed to supporting you and answering your property questions with valuable content. There's a lot to cover, and with your support, we can make it happen. So if you find our content valuable, I'd be extremely grateful if you could hit the subscribe button. Thank you for being a part of our community.